Welcome back to the Fantasy Grimoire podcast. And today we have one of my favorite people from Bookstagram joining us, Jourdan.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And Jourdan, I think when I started this podcast, inevitably I knew I needed you on here because you have been pivotal to not just my career as an author, but to so many author careers. And I really just wanted the readers and the listeners to understand a little bit more about what you do in the Bookstagram space.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I was so excited to hear you were starting a podcast, so I'm thrilled that I get to be one of your guests. So thank you for having me.
An absolute pleasure. Now, I want to see if I can remember where we actually met because I was trying to piece this back and I wasn't 100% sure because it's been a while. I think it was the Bookswiggles. We originally worked together there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was like your debut. I think you booked a tour with the tour gals for your debut because I remember the picture that I took. I was like standing over my wall over here and I had like two white books fanned out and like your book like in the center. I was going through this phase of like photos that were like this frame. I don't really know, but I liked the picture. I remember being like, this is a pretty cover. I like this picture. And then here we are now.
And I know that I can't write a book blurb without you now because that is a secret talent of yours.
Okay, something that I like sort of discovered about myself is that I love writing, like helping people workshop their book blurbs. And you and I just make the best book blurb team. Like it is so much fun to write a book blurb with you because we're on the same wavelength. Like we can write stuff. And I love the notes that we leave each other. Like this isn't the right wording, but like, you know what I mean? And then the next version that I receive is like, you knew exactly what I meant. You put it in the right words. It is so fun.
You know, I think that was the wildest thing for me is that you do primarily focus on the romantic genre, which we're going to touch on in a little bit. But me being a predominantly urban fantasy author, you were just like, yeah, I'm ready. Hold my beer. I understand your industry. I understand you. And you were just like, I'm going to make that happen. Love it.
Yeah, like let's do it. And like I do read urban fantasy and I do enjoy urban fantasy. So that probably helped. I went through like a big urban fantasy phase, like probably around like COVID, like 2020, 2021. So that probably helped. But also we just make a really good team. And that makes it fun.
It's incredible to actually feel like you're doing business with a friend, not just another service provider or something like that. And the way that we can switch between the business stuff and the non-business stuff is the wildest thing to me.
It is so cool. And that has been my relationship with you has been one of my favorite things to come out of my business because you and I, it's exactly like you said, and you actually have like said that before just to like me, like the way that we can switch between, we're going to talk about business stuff and now we're going to talk about friend stuff and we like do both and we do them seamlessly and effortlessly and it's not weird and it doesn't feel, I don't know, like I feel like sometimes in business relationships, it can feel like there's this imbalance or like superiority complex or whatever. I don't know. But for you and me, it's so natural and it's just easy. And I love how we can have a business relationship and we can also have a friendship.
You have multiple businesses. So it's not just your mentorship / blog offering. You're also an influencer, but you also have a book club. Like I actually can't keep up with how many businesses you have and you're a working mom, might I add. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I guess, I've always been a reader. I've always loved reading. I was a librarian before my kids were born. I was an English teacher and then I was a librarian. And when I was a librarian, people were always asking me for book recommendations. And so that's when I found about this little community on Instagram called Bookstagram. I heard about it on like an Epic Reads blog. And so back when blogs were still a thing, which they're really not a thing anymore. And so I was like, I'm going to make a Bookstagram and recommend my books. And from there, that's when I realized, really like in 2020, that, hey, this is something I love. I have gained a lot of knowledge about this space, and I already bring a lot of knowledge in based off of my history as a librarian, history as an English teacher. And I would love to turn this passion of mine and this knowledge of mine into some sort of a business. And at the time, I didn't really know what that was going to look like. It started off just doing individual one-on-one collaborations, because another really cool thing, like COVID sucked, period. But a cool thing to come out of COVID is that that's when a lot of the indie authors that we love, like, really decided, like, hey, I now have this time. I'm home. I'm stuck at home. I'm going to write my book. I'm going to figure out how to publish it. And so with the emergence of like a big, surge of indie publishing happening in 2020, indie authors were trying to figure out how to market their books and how to sell their books. And so they were coming to book influencers. And it was interesting. It was a really shift in kind of like how things have been done up to that point, because up to that point, most collaborations were done with traditional publishers, like the big five in the US, and they were all unpaid. And it was like, well, you're getting a free book out of it. You should be happy and you should post it and, deal with it. And anybody who tried to ask for compensation beyond a free book for their collaborations was like, you were met with a lot of harsh criticism. People were very angry about it. But with people coming into this book space without a knowledge of like how it worked up to that point, they expected, hey, I'm paying someone for a marketing service. I would go to a newspaper and pay them for an ad in the newspaper. The same thing with an influencer. I would go to an influencer and pay them for an ad. I could get paid for this like service that I'm providing, this platform that I've created. And so that's when I started like that part of my business. And my philosophy for that part of my business has always been, and I think always will be, that I'm going to value my time. I'm going to value my platform. I'm going to stay true to my platform and my audience that I've curated, while also remaining affordable. Like I know that indies are funding their whole publishing journey. Fact. That's a fact. Publishing is expensive. I want to be a space where, yes, you are investing in me, you're investing in a feature post with me or whatever, but I want you to be able to like get that return on your investment, So a little bit about my philosophy for pricing. Worked with Tour Gals, and then we created like an indie publish or an indie, like a boutique marketing firm for indie authors. That's how we pitched ourselves. And we offered great services to indie authors. However, it was taking up a lot of my time. And so I knew, and like you said, being a mom, I have twins, like my priority is my family. I love reading. I love Instagram. I love helping authors, but like my number one priority always will be my family. So I needed to find a way to turn my Instagram into something that like to reclaim a little bit of the joy, because when things become work, you kind of lose a little bit of the joy in it. And then also to reclaim a little bit of my time, because while I loved working with tour gals and being a tour gal, it took up a lot of time. So I knew that I wanted to transition out of that. So that's when I decided, and I was encouraged by one of my friends, Vanessa Rassinen, who is an indie author. She encouraged me to start a book branding business. And I couldn't really figure out how to articulate the services that I offered. But basically, I wanted to help indies brand themselves, from like covers to book blurbs to figuring out how to market, how to use Instagram to market, how to find their readers, who are your readers, like everything involved in market. I wanted to help authors have a successful author career. And so much of that is determined by like your presence on social media, your blurb, your cover, all of finding your readers. If you don't know who your target readers are, how are you going to find them? Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at now with my business. I also do beta reading for authors, but I don't do very many of those a year because those take up a lot of time. And I have my book club. That's an online virtual book club where we work with romantic authors. It's a once a month meeting. And it's like a community platform that we chat on throughout the month about the book. And then we meet with the author at the end of the month. Diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which sounds very made up. I understand that. However, if you've experienced chronic fatigue, you know that it is not made up. So it's hard. Like, I'll be straight up honest with you. It's hard. But I think what is really wonderful about this business that I've created is that I really am in control over my time. Like, I can say yes or no to things. I can limit the number of clients that I work with each month. And having that freedom has really, especially this past school year, just been so important to me. And I'm just so thankful that it's a change that I made, because it has been necessary.
I actually didn't know that was how it got started. And having used that service myself more than once, one of my favorite things about the experience is you really focus on empowering us with knowledge that we can retain after our mentorship. And I think that's so important, because even now, one of the first things you say to me was that follower counts are not important. An engaged community is where you want to be. And that is something that I still live by to this day. And gifting myself a mentorship program with you was one of the best things I did for my indie author career. 100%.
Oh, that means so much to me.
And in the corporate world, I would call you a business strategist, because if you think about all the things you were talking there, you're talking about strategy, not just the marketing strategy, branding strategy, and maybe a bit of content strategy. So that's how I would categorize it in the corporate world.
I love that, and I'm writing it down because that's so good. I feel like I struggle to summarize what I do in like a phrase. Business strategist, like author business strategist. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Maybe even my philosophy on like how I price myself with like feature posts, like marketing posts. I want this mentorship, because it is an investment. I want it to be something that you are getting your return on investment on, and that it like lasts and it doesn't end when our 4 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever it is. Like, when that's over, it doesn't end, that you can take what you've learned and continue to apply it. And, remember the things that I say, like with the follower count, it doesn't matter how many followers you have. What matters is having an engaged community, because that is so true. And it's hard in a world where we feel like things are driven by follower counts, like how many followers you have, like that somehow equals validity. And it does not. Like, you could have 1,000 followers, and if only 2 people are engaged, well, that's not an engaged community. Or you can have 700 followers and 100 people are engaged, or 200 people, or what, like that's what matters, is engaging your community, having that community. And I think that that's something that you do really well. Like, when you're on your stories, I think that your reels and your carousel posts, like you do a lot of like value add things. And I know that your community really appreciates that.
I'm not gonna lie, when one of my followers, if she's listening, I think you pronounce her handle Ladies White. when she told me that my content felt authentic and she can feel it, I was like, oh, like it was just like, I was like, I will not cry. I will not cry. But I was like, even if she is the only person that looks at my content going forward, that to me alone is worth it, because that authenticity is so much what I'm striving for as well. And I learned that from you. So it's kind of like
that makes me happy.
moment.
Yes, that is who you want in your community. Your community is made for her. She is when you think of my ideal community member, like it's someone like that. And it's similar to like readers. That's why it's so important to like find who is your target reader and like find those people and cultivate that community. And, you're doing that really well on your account.
But, Jourdan, you've also taught me another thing. When we first started with the mentorship, I had a little bit of let's say a complex, because I wasn't doing the trendy things that everyone else does. And you really taught me to lean into the things that makes me me. And sure, maybe I don't follow all the marketing rules the way I should, but it really is Stephanie Storm at its core. And I'm finding a lot of my followers are connecting with that because it's relatable. Sure, I may not have the prettiest content all the times, but as you said, there's a value add to it. And I spend a lot of time creating that for them, and it shows. So thank you for teaching me that as well.
Yeah, of course. I love that. Leading into 2025 and like currently in 2025, of people saying that like the new trend, for lack of a better word, is authenticity and being real. And so you've been leaning into that before that was ever a discussion. So you like making that like, this is who I am. This is Stephanie Storm. This is like what you see is what you get. And people really connect with that and appreciate that and value that.
Well, on that note, I do romanticy holds a special place in your heart. Like if we're talking authenticity, if one of the first things that I have to think about when it comes to you, it's romanticy immediately.
Yeah.
I was still picking your intro song for your reel that we're going to use for the podcast, and I was like, I found the perfect enemies to lovers intro song that I'm going to use for you. I'll keep that to myself.
I cannot wait to hear it.
But I was like, this is Jourdan, okay? Because it just supports her love for romanticy. Do you want to tell us why it holds such a special place in your heart?
Yeah. So I've always been a reader, but my first love has always been fantasy. Fantasy, like the first book I remember my dad read to me. He read to me every night. The first book I remember him reading with me was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I think that was just kind of like it for me. Like that's why I love fantasy. And then as I continued to like grow up, in middle school binge read this historical, it wasn't a fantasy, but like this historical romance series, and just loved it with like and they would touch each other's hand and like the butterfly. I loved the romance. So I think it was natural for me to then like leap into like combining the two things, the romance and the fantasy. But I really didn't start reading again until I was out of college. I was an English major, so we had to do lots of reading for school. And when you're required to read, reading becomes not fun anymore. So after college, I got back into reading and kind of just did a little bit of dystopian here and there. But I think when I entered into a harder season of life, I wanted to completely disconnect from anything even remotely similar to reality. And for me, that was fantasy, because nothing in a fantasy book, in the world building, like you can't find it in the real world. Right. And I think that's what I love about it, is that it's such a disconnect for me and it's an escape. And at the time, like that's what I needed. I needed an escape, but I needed that romance, like the heart pounding. Are they going to get together? The enemies, we all know they're going to become lovers, but like how? And I needed something that I could just like fly through and completely like disconnect from emotionally. And so that's when I found ACOTAR, which was the only book out. It was only book 1, ACOTAR. And it found me at the right time. And then I found Throne of Glass. It found me at the right time. And the series kind of walked with me through like the hardest 4 years of my life, which were when we were going through infertility. And I just needed something to completely disconnect me from the sadness of like walking around every day and, you know, not to get like too sad or whatever, but like walking around every day and like seeing little babies or going to Target to buy makeup and having to walk past the diapers, like, or the Mother's Day cards or whatever, like it's everywhere. And when you're going through infertility, like that's, you don't want the constant reminders. It's hard. It's really hard, but you still have to live your life. And so for me to be able to completely disconnect and escape into those worlds was really important. And so Romantasy found me at the right time. And I think that's why I love it so much. I know that's why I love it so much, because it was there for me when I needed it.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say that with regards to your infertility, I do think it's important to be able to talk about those kinds of experiences because, and this is something we've discussed, is that it's very much a part of real life. And I think being able to give people something that they can relate to, because sure, maybe one listener's not going through infertility, but they're also experiencing a chronic disease and they're feeling a little bit more comfortable because you're talking so openly about it. And I think that message is really, really important. But at the same time, you've touched on something I have been discussing with other guests, is that fantasy does provide us with this escapism because sometimes, to be blunt, real life sucks. Okay, we love life and all those things. Yeah. Sometimes you have a bad day and you want to go to the night court and chill with the bad boys and, you know, have a good time. We all love that. It's why we are as passionate about this community, your presence on the Bookstagram community, for lack of a better word. But we all know that social media is a highlight reel. And it's, you didn't just magically wake up one day and be like, hey, I'm a successful business owner, look at me go. There was a lot that you went through to get there. So what do you feel comfortable sharing with us? What are some of those challenges you had to go through?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It has not been a cakewalk. I mean, even just like superficially, like figuring out, do I need to be an LLC or can I just continue? Like, how do I file taxes on this, you know, on my business? Like things like that, not fun, not glamorous. But then also like, you know, behind the scenes stuff, I am someone who I would say I'm confident. I'm really concerned about like people's opinions of me. However, I think we all, to some degree, want to be liked and want that approval. And like, I don't know if you're big into the Enneagram. I'm an Enneagram 5. I know you and I have probably talked about the Enneagram. Yeah. And the Enneagram 5's like core trait or defining trait is that they want people to believe they're competent. I want you to believe and know that I am competent and capable. And so when you put yourself out there, even like a business, you don't want it. I don't want anyone to be like, who is she? What does she think she's doing? Like, how does she think she can do this? And so like, you know, that it's scary. It's scary to put yourself out. Like, who does she think she is, that she can have a business mentoring authors or tell people how to write, how to market their book? She's never written a book. Correct. I've never written a book before. I had no desire to write a book.
They even as an author, because a lot of the time I'm like, shit, do people hate my writing? Are they going to resonate with my stories? And I've actually been talking with previous guests about this as well, about how it's scary to put yourself out there where you're like, I believe in myself, but maybe not everyone else will. And that risk of rejection, it's always hanging over your shoulder.
Yeah. And I think like, this is so interesting and maybe I'm having like an aha moment talking to you, but something that I always tell my authors is like, you are not going to be for everyone. But the book you're writing is not for everyone. You are writing it for a specific group of people. And so if someone gets a hold of your book, which they will, someone's going to get a hold of your book and they're not going to be your target audience and they're not going to like your book.
Yeah.
And they're going to leave you a bad review. And that's going to suck. But that's not who you're writing for the book for, because the people you're writing the book for are the people who send you the messages saying like, I read this and I felt so seen, or, oh my gosh, this quote moved me to tears, or I can't wait for book 2. Like, that is who you're writing book 2 for. And I guess I can apply that to myself as well. Like, why did I start this business? I started this business for, people like Stephanie Storm, who maybe just needed someone to tell them like, hey, you have great ideas. You are on the right track. We can workshop this blurb together and make it better, but you know what you're doing and you should be confident in yourself. So I don't know. That's something to think about.
So one of my favorite things about you, and there's a lot, is you don't stroke my ego. You tell me straight, no, this, and you sometimes, what was the one time that you were like, I'm going to step away for a little bit after this. I'm going to let you sit with that.
Yeah. I do that. So like if I feel like, okay, I'm going to say something. But that's the beautiful thing about like having a relationship, a working relationship where you know that the person that on the other end has like cares about you, has your best interest at heart, wants the best for you. You can like share hard things and like trust that even though it might take them a minute to receive it, that like they're going to receive it knowing that you have the best intentions. And so I think for us especially, like I know that I can say things to you that you may not love to hear, but you know that it's coming from a place of like, I care about you and I want the best for you.
100% yes. And just to your point, so Rule of the Damned, the last book that we worked on in terms of launching, I had more reviews, but there were 2 reviews that stuck out to me specifically that actually made me quite emotional as an author, where I had one person from the LGBTQIA+, I can't say that fast, community, that was shocked that there was actually a main character that was gay, because they had never read a fantasy book, at least in an urban fantasy setting, where there was that kind of representation, which they were in previous books, but it was more like a side character or a passing character. It was never someone that had the front and center. And the fact that they felt so seen and represented like made me emotional. And then another reader messaged me, and she included in her review that my book got her out of a book slump. And I mean, as far as compliments go, you can't really top that one.
Yeah. Like those are the reviews or the messages or whatever that like you have to hold on to, because like that, those are the people that you are writing your book for. And I know that for authors and for me as a business owner, there's always like those critical voices in the back of your head that somebody might have said something to you one time that like, or you read one negative review, but it hangs out in the back of your head and like pops up when you don't need it to. And that's when we need to remember like, okay, but look back at this message I got. This is who I'm writing for. This is who I'm helping. This is, yeah. And so I think that those are like, that's why you do what you do. And I think that that's beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. Now, Jourdan, because you are closer to the industry than I would say more so than the average bookstagrammer, I want to chat about trends that you're hoping not just to see in the indie space, but we can talk hybrid, trad, whatever works for you. I know specifically this week every 6 months we go through this KU boycott cycle, which is annoying.
It is.
But what do you hope to see from an industry in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to imagine a world or like an indie author landscape without something like KU. I would love to see there be an alternative to KU, or honestly to see KU. I would love KU to lose their exclusivity contract, because they don't have that contract with TradPub. TradPub can stick a book on KU and still go and sell the ebook on Barnes & Noble, right? And I hate that indie authors have the exclusivity contract. So what I would love to see that go away. I do, not because of any sort of a boycott, because I do not think a boycott is the answer, like KU boycott. Boycott Amazon all you want. Don't boycott KU. But I would love to see Amazon consider removing that exclusivity contract from indies specifically, because it is so limiting. And I don't think that it's not going to make Amazon lose any money, because I was speaking with people about KU. They operate KU at a loss. Like, it's not like they're making money off of KU. But I do think that, like, with indie publishing becoming it becomes more and more like, legitimate is not the right word, but viable to like make your career in indie publishing with every year that passes, like since COVID really, that I do think that Amazon will feel the pressure to at least consider removing that exclusivity contract or from the contract, exclusivity clause from the contract. That's what I'm trying to say. And since it's something they're already doing for TradPub, it's not a big jump for them to also do it for indies. So that's something that like I would love to see, and that I do think could be on the table for the next few years. As far as like publishing trends, I think that urban fantasy, I think our next big trend in fantasy is going to be urban fantasy. I think we've got a lot coming out, especially from TradPub in the next couple of years. And usually when you can see what's coming up on like a TradPub publishing timeline, kind of gives you an idea of where trends are going. So even like steampunky, Peaky Blinders sort of vibes. We've got a few TradPub books coming out in the next few years. I do think those are like the next trends for publishing. So if you're already writing urban fantasy, you're in the right genre.
That is really comforting for someone like me to know. But you have been saying for a while that since Crescent City finished, or at least the first 3 books, it's left a little bit of a gap in the urban fantasy space.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I'm beta reading a book right now that is very Crescent City vibes. It's set at a school. So not really like, not Harry Potter vibes, not that sort of school, but it's like a demon hunting school. But the city in which the demon hunting school is like the portal is located in is very Crescent City. So like, and this one is going to be a TradPub book coming out from Berkeley. So like I'm seeing the writing on the wall. It's kind of like not like pat on the back, but it is a little bit reassuring to be like, hey, I've been saying this for a little while and now I'm seeing it like come to fruition. So I definitely think that people want more of it. And like, I love Sarah J. Maas and I love her books, but House of Flame and Shadow was not it. So people are looking for an urban fantasy book that is it. And to fill like what House of Flame and Shadow didn't provide, what people needed. So yeah, I think, so one other thing I wanted to say too, about like how I see things going in the future. I think that indie publishing is just going to continue to be more viable. I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't think people are going to regress and lose faith in indie publishers and like indie authors. I think it's only going to become more and more viable. I hope that we continue to see indie books showing up in, brick and mortar bookstores. I know my local indie bookstore shelves indie books. And I think that there are going to be more opportunities for indie authors to sell foreign rights to publishers, to sell audiobook rights. That's something that we're already seeing happening really in the last year or so. Lots of indie authors are selling their audiobook rights and having success doing that. And so I just think that that's going to continue. And I love that because that makes publishing, I feel like that makes publishing so much more accessible. It takes out the, multi-year process of finding an agent and going on sub and getting picked up. Like I'm excited about that.
Well, I can agree with you. So out of all of Sarah J. Maas's series, we both know that I was a Crescent City girly. So the fact that I agree with you about House of Flame and Shadow, I was like, mm-mm. I was like, no. I was like, this is not it at all.
No. Man,
and
it's not it.
I loved Bryce. I loved Bryce
I
in
do
book one. Book
Yes.
one with the vacuum cleaner scene. We all know which one
Yes.
I'm talking about.
Yes.
I was
Like, it was like 3 a.m. and I was reading that and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, when I finished Crescent City 1, I literally wrote in my review, this is my new favorite Sarah J. Maas book. But then you get to Flame and Shadow and I'm like, but you fumbled the ball so badly.
Yeah.
So sad.
It makes me wonder if that's why she's taking so long to release news with ACOTAR 6.
Yeah.
Because that has not been normal for any publisher. No.
Well, so I heard, not to completely sidetrack, but we had a big book club last year when Flame and Shadow came out. I'm in a couple local book clubs. And we had a big party for Flame and Shadow. And what I heard is that she rewrote the entirety of Flame and Shadow over the summer of, I guess that would have been like 23. What she should have done is delayed publication, which I know sucks, but people fangirlies would have been mad, but like the people who really care would not have been mad. I've got lots of thoughts on that. I'm going to stop.
But it's so true though. And I love sidebars. So let's have a sidebar. So there's two things that I've learned in my little baby indie author world in comparison. Is number one, your editor makes or breaks you. Okay. If you do not have the right editor, there's a problem. And I heard the same rumor, but on top of that, I heard that she had a new editor for the book. Okay. Now, yeah.
That makes sense though.
Yeah. And an
editor is like a therapist or a doctor. You might have to try a couple till you find the one that's right for you. But yeah.
I said to my editor, I was like, you can consider yourself married to me now. Like this is not ending. I was like, I have her busy for the next few years. I was like, you are booked.
Yeah.
Like that is the message.
Right.
So I love you, Kate.
So interesting. That's so interesting though. And I mean, yeah, makes a lot of sense because it felt, I don't know. I'm really stuck on that because it felt so different than any of her other books. And so if there was a different editor, that would be why it felt so different. The first book she released since exploding on TikTok. And so I think there was a lot of pressure on her. I think in books past, she would have just delayed publication because she did. I don't remember what book it was for. Maybe it was Flame and Shadow, but like she has pushed publication before. It's not like she'd never done it.
Yeah.
And not Flame and Shadow, but Silver Flames. I think she pushed that stuff. Anyway, but there was so much pressure and so much hype on this book. I would think that there was probably pressure from Bloomsbury, like, no, we need to get it out. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, if we want to talk about pressure for a second, because I agree with you, I'm seeing a lot of people, at least on the socials, talk about moving away from Goodreads because they're fed up with Goodreads for multiple reasons. And they're pushing to move to alternatives like a StoryGraph or a Fable. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think so. I am not on any other platform but Goodreads. but that's only because I really don't even like use Goodreads a whole lot, and I'm too lazy to import my data into another platform. It's a little bit too stressful for me to have another platform that I have to manage. But from what I know about StoryGraph, I have a bunch of friends like in real life and on Instagram who've made that like transition over to StoryGraph. StoryGraph seems fantastic. I love that you can do like partial stars for starters. We need to be able to do that on Goodreads. And what I really like about StoryGraph is how specific you can get with like content warnings and trigger warnings or like tropes. Like for me, that's something that Goodreads doesn't even touch. You can't even categorize things based off of content warnings or whatever, but you can tag them on StoryGraph, and that is so helpful. And I think I really like that platform. I don't know anything about Fable, but I think the move over to StoryGraph, I think that that's a good thing.
I'm somewhere 50-50 because I agree with you. The idea of managing another platform at the moment just seems very intimidating. But at the same time, for anyone that doesn't know, Goodreads is also owned by Amazon, just FYI. And they haven't been investing any product development into Goodreads, which is why the interface is a little bit outdated, which is surprising considering how many users they have. And I think that's why what I'm seeing in the industry trends is that people are getting frustrated by lack of this functionality that you're referencing for StoryGraph. And they're going, well, you guys won't give it to me. I'm going to chuck to someone else that is going to give it to me. See, even the AI agrees with me.
It does agree. Yeah. And it's so true. And it's so true and so funny though. When you look at Goodreads, it looks like it's, circa 2005. Done nothing with it.
Yeah.
I do plan to eventually move to StoryGraph. It's just a matter of like needing the capacity in my personal life to move to StoryGraph.
That makes sense. I'm not going to lie. I may have just made a note to copy you and do the same when I have a moment.
Perfect.
So I want to talk about another trend that I have seen on socials where I'm seeing a lot of authors talking about, I am working on surprise projects. I did it for the podcast. I'm also seeing surprise releases become a little bit more common amongst the Bookstagram space. I would love to know from your side. There's a few kind of questions in this. Number one, is this something you see becoming the industry norm? And then the follow-up part of that is, are there any negative sides we should consider? And is this something you would recommend to a debut author?
So for starters, I would not recommend a debut author surprise release. I think surprise releases work for people who have an established readership, an established following, and this established community. But I don't think that it is a great publication plan for somebody who is a debut. They're publishing their very first book. Now, if you're publishing the book and you're writing it just for yourself and you just want to get it out there, great. Go for it, publish it, cool. But if you're publishing the book and you would like to have readers, which, I think there are probably people on both sides of the fence, but most people want to have readers who read their books, then it wouldn't be what I recommend for a debut. Let's have a marketing plan. And that doesn't mean you need to spend lots and lots of money to create this marketing plan or to market your book. You do not have to do that. I do not think that that is necessary at all. But you do need to have some sort of a plan to market. And you need to build that hype, because when you're a debut, you're trying to create your readers. Like, you're trying to create this community. You don't already have it established. So I would not recommend a debut surprise dropping. But if you're an author with an established readership, even if you only have 1 or 2 books under your belt, I think that the positive side of surprise dropping is that it takes off a lot of the pressure for you to crank a book out and get it out by a certain date because you've told people and you've got to get it out. And so you're going to burn yourself out in order to get this book out. Like I was talking to somebody the other day and she was saying to me that she just feels like she has just been cranking books out and it has been exhausting and she is burnt out and just feels like hasn't written in like 3 months because she just cannot put words on paper. And so my advice to her was take the pressure off of yourself. Do not put a publication date on this. Write it for fun. Go back and remember, and don't write the next trend that you think is going to be successful. Write the book that you want to write, the book that you want to read. Go back to that idea you had 5 years ago that you were so excited about, but you didn't think it was in line with trends. Like, write that book. Now is the time to write it. And like, let yourself rediscover that, like, the love for writing. And by taking off that pressure, you're allowing yourself more creative freedom because you're not writing to a deadline. You're just writing because you love it. So I think that's one of the positive sides to like not having a set release date and surprise dropping is that you can do it on your own timeline. And I think that if you're in burnout or teetering on burnout, that could be a really great option. And then also, you know, you don't have this huge marketing plan. You're not having to worry about a street team or booking tours leading up to release or getting arcs out there or whatever, coming up with a cover reveal because you're just surprise dropping. Like, it feels less stressful. Downside to it could be that, you know, you don't have all that hype leading up to release. Unless you're doing the surprise drop by being like, something exciting is coming on, you know, like in the next month, I'm not going to tell you when. But by doing a surprise drop, you're not benefiting from the hype of a street team, the hype generated from a cover reveal or the boost in pre-orders generated from a cover reveal. You know, you're not benefiting from the book releasing and automatically having reviews because you did arcs. So I think that there are positives and negatives, but I think especially for any author who's dealing with burnout, take the pressure off of yourself and just have this be a surprise release. And if you've written the book and if for yourself, like as a therapeutic exercise, I'm rediscovering my love of writing, then it almost too takes the pressure off of like, I need this to be successful because I've spent so much time and money and effort and energy. Like, it was a fun project. And of course we want it to do well, but it alleviates some of that pressure.
I'm not burnt out as an author. My latest release, it's going to release soon, The Judgment, which is the final book in my Witch Times trilogy. I didn't really do much marketing or build any hype towards it because I was like, I just want to write that book for me. Just because I want to complete a series and I want to be able to have fun with it. And it was my first experience with Dev Edits, and my editor dropped the suggestion. So it was only supposed to be a singular POV book. And I ended up with a multi-POV book, and I ended up going into this feminine rage character, and it was so much fun. I had such a blast writing that. And sure, it's going to it's going to release now in like a week or two, and I won't have any pre-orders, and I'm okay with that because I wrote it for me, and there's something empowering about it.
Yeah. And like, you know, and if you want to continue writing, and this is something you want to do for a long time because you love it, then you need to give yourself the freedom to do things like that. Like, I'm going to write for me, like, because for the joy of it, for the fun of it, because I love it. And I'm not writing for anybody else. And I think, you know, there is this maybe I don't know if anybody is actively making authors feel this way, but so many authors feel the pressure of like, I've got a rapid release. I've got to release 3 books a year, da, 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 da. And that is not sustainable for 95% of the population, you know, like, it's not sustainable. But in a reaction to that, people have felt that pressure. They have been trying to push these books out. And so many authors are like teetering on burnout right now. And so I just think that this sort of idea of like surprise drops I think it's in reaction to that. And I think that it could be really helpful for people who are feeling burnt out.
I started rapid releasing with 3 books per year, which I could do because I don't have kids, so I have a little bit more flexibility. But I could kind of see that in the next year, I was going to be approaching burnout. And it was actually authors like Vanessa, who I think she only releases 1 book per year.
Yeah.
It was like she gave me the permission I needed to know that it was okay and you can still build a sustainable career with 1 book per year. And I needed that.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think that's one thing I really admire about her and love about her is that she is very open and transparent. And she's been open and transparent about that like, I'll never be an author who can publish multiple books a year. And I'm okay with that. And because she has said that and she's made it clear that that's who she is, like her readers expect that and know that about her and they stick around. Like she's proven that her readers stick around. Through being vocal about it too, has kind of shown, like you're saying, shown to authors, like you can do this.
Yeah, totally. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about if an unpublished author was watching this podcast, if you could give them 1 piece of advice, what would it be?
I would tell them well, first of all, just because you're unpublished doesn't mean, I think a lot of times unpublished authors can feel like, well, I'm not a real author. No, you're writing a book. You are literally an author. You are an author. Own that and like be proud of yourself, because people like me, I cannot write a book. I would not know where to start. So like that is amazing and admirable. So you are an author. Now, maybe to like set yourself up for success or to help you find your readers. Like my advice would be to create an Instagram and just start posting and not worry about aesthetics or having a cohesive feed or whatever that means, because I feel like people feel so much pressure to fit this certain like idea of what they think an Instagram should look like. But like, be real, be authentic, start creating content, start sharing your book on social media, even if it's just a little Canva graphic that you threw together in 5 minutes that shares your book title or shares a quote that you love that you wrote yesterday during your writing session. Invite people into your writing journey. So if you're currently writing your book and you're preparing for publication and you're like, well, what can I share? I haven't written a book yet. Like I haven't published my book. Share pieces of your writing journey and invite people in. People love being a part. Readers on Instagram especially love being able to feel like they were a part of your journey and want to support and cheerlead you on your journey. So invite people into that. Create an Instagram and make sure you have a good cover. That would be my like one sort of like marketing thing. Make sure you have a good cover. You can get a good pre-made without spending hundreds of dollars. But if I were going to spend money anywhere, if I had $200 to put into this book outside of finding an editor, I would spend $200 on a beautiful pre-made. But you can get a beautiful ebook pre-made for less than $200. So those would be my 2 pieces of advice. Instagram, be real, invite people into your journey, and make sure you have a good cover.
If someone is considering maybe booking a mentorship with you, what are the things that they should consider and what do you look for to see if it's going to be a good fit for you?
Yeah. So I tend to only work with people in the fantasy genre, which urban fantasy falls in that. I do sometimes work with people in the romance genre because romantasy, it's still similar tropes and similar feels just in the real world. So like if you're writing contemporary fiction or maybe even like just sci-fi or nonfiction or something, like then we're not going to be the right fit because I don't know what's working in the contemporary fiction, historical fiction genre. But what I do know is the romance, fantasy, romantasy. So like that's my wheelhouse. That's one thing I look for. And then for beyond that, if you fit within those genres and you want to pursue a mentorship with me, the great thing about these mentorships is that you can get so much out of it if you're also willing to put work into it. So something that people who have worked with me recently that I have found made our time together just really successful is they will come into our time together with a list of questions or a list of things that like, hey, during our 2 weeks or our 4 weeks, because I offer 2-week mentorships and also 4-week mentorships or just a 1-hour call. But for the mentorship specifically, if people come in with a list of like, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I want to work on, then our time can be hyper-focused and you can get so much out of our time together. And of course, I come into our time together too with like, hey, these are things that I am seeing that I think that we can work on and refine or, you know, pivot from or whatever. I come in with things as well that I want us to work through. But I think another piece of people coming into it with questions or targeted things that they want to work through, if you have already put the time into creating that list, you are also going to put the time into the mentorship to make sure that we're working through that list. And the mentorships that have been the most successful are people who are 100% present, committed, want to be there, and put work into it. If somebody is not also willing to like workshop with me or respond to messages or post on their Instagram, like I can only do so much, but somebody else has to it has to be like a give and take. You know what I'm saying?
So I think the saying that comes to mind is you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make them drink.
Yes, that is what I'm trying to say. That is 100% accurate.
And I know, speaking from experience with our first mentorship, I had no idea what to expect. So I just made 50,000 billion questions. And I think I blew up your phone with my billion questions for the whole month.
It was so fun though. And I loved that because I knew that you were committed. Like you were invested in this. You wanted like to get out of it what you were putting into it. And when I know exactly what you want, that's so like, it just makes me so excited because I feel like I know I have a lot of knowledge that I bring to this. But if I don't know what you want from me because you're not telling me, then I can only read minds so far, or I can only lead a horse to water, like you're saying.
Well, it's, I know our husbands think we can mind read, but that's just how it's
They do think we can mind read, and sometimes we can, but oftentimes we cannot.
At the beginning of this this recording, you were referencing your book club, Prosecco and Pages. Do you want to talk us through how do you select the romantasy pick of the month?
Yeah. So first off, I only do indie romantasy. I'm very niched into that. That's all we do. I have an application in my bio on Instagram where people can apply to be considered. And I just sort of have a bank of applications that I go through when I'm looking to fill my months. For example, 2025, I have scheduled through April, but I'll be looking for like May and beyond here in the next month or so. So often I pull from applications, but sometimes if there's a book that I really want to read or that I have read recently and loved, I will just directly reach out to that author and be like, hey, would you be interested in being my book club pick? And from an author perspective, all it really requires from like as a commitment is that you would be willing to jump on a 1-hour live with us at the end of the month and just chat with us about your book. Some authors also want to like host a giveaway for a copy of their book, or maybe they have written a bonus scene that they've only made exclusive to newsletter subscribers, but they're willing to share it with my book club members. So authors kind of have done different things, but the only thing I require to be a book club pick is that you'll meet with us once a month or at the end of the month for an hour.
Has been doing incredibly well. You've got a great community going there, and you have a lot of authors that want to be picked.
Yeah, I've got like I think like 70 applications. It's a little overwhelming. I'm not going to lie, but it's cool. I love that authors want to be a part of this. And it really is a special community. Like some of the people that I have met through my book club, I have then gone on to meet in real life at like book conferences. And they're just great people. It's been a cool community.
Before we wrap up our episode, I do have to ask, what can we expect to see next from you and your businesses?
Well, so without going into so many details, I have plans for my business that I was hoping to maybe like kick off earlier this year, but life has just sort of thrown me a whole bunch of curveballs all at one time. Eventually this year, I would like to have a YouTube presence, and take some of the knowledge that I share with authors and maybe put them into like short 5-minute or even less like little conversations on YouTube. And I would like to create like a Patreon community for authors as well. Had planned to get that done a little bit earlier this year, but like I said, life has been unrelenting. So maybe this summer, we'll see.
If people are listening to this episode and they resonate with what you're saying and they want to connect, what is the best way to either support you and or connect with you?
I mean, my big platform where I spend most of my time is Instagram. I really like engaging with people in DMs. I will say that lately I have not been great at DMs, but I really enjoy engaging in my broadcast channel. So if you are already following my Instagram, join my broadcast channel. I chat on a more personal level with people in my broadcast channel. I enjoy doing that. I have a YouTube right now. I don't even know if it's linked in my bio, but it might be. But if you're an author who might want to consider working together, I have my intake forms in my bio as well. And I share like pricing and things like that on the intake forms. So both for like collaborations, like feature posts and things of that nature. And then for my mentorships, the 1-hour calls, the 2 or 4 week mentorships, that is also an intake form in my bio. And so is my beta reading intake form. So a few different things linked in my bio. The best place to do that is either by joining my book club or being in my broadcast channel.
And Jourdan, I just forgot one question that I forgot to ask you, which I asked every single guest, which I didn't ask you. What is an underrated fantasy book? And I think I know which answer you're going to give me, but I'm going to ask anyway. Underrated fantasy book that you wish people would get more on.
Okay. So it's actually coming out next month. I love Once the Skies Fade by Vanessa Rassinen. You knew I was going to say it. Actually, so it's a series of standalones, romantic standalones, which means like in a romance book, the happily ever after happens in each book, but there is an overarching sort of like political plot in the world for all the books in the series. But you can read each book by itself and be fine. What I love about Once the Skies Fade, one of the things I love, is that at the beginning of the book, she has a recap of book 1. So you can literally jump into Once the Skies Fade, having never read book 1, and you're fine because one of the main characters in Once the Skies Fade has written you a recap of book 1. It is so fun. So that's the one that people need to read. I love it. The female main character is probably my all-time favorite female main character. Vanessa, talking about Enneagrams, she's an Enneagram 4. This female main character is an Enneagram 8. And 4s and 8s are completely not the same at all. And I really workshopped this character with her because what Vanessa as her person would do is not at all what this character would do. But what this character would do is a whole lot of what I would do. So it's beautiful. It is a beautiful book. Reading the character going through this like grief journey without saying too much about it. It's really cathartic. It's very emotional. I'm not a crier. The book made me cry multiple times. If you have ever experienced grief, whether losing someone or losing a dream or whatever it is, I think that you will relate to this story. And the male main character is hilarious. So there's like the lightheartedness too.
So yes, that's exactly the book I thought you were going to suggest, but I was going to ask anyway. And I will confess that I was going to buy the book anyway, because I like to own my books. And when I saw that Vanessa was doing the recap, because she posted about it on her socials, I was like, now I'm buying it for research purposes, because that is a phenomenal idea. And I might want to do that.
Yes. And what I love too is that then people always say interconnected standalones, you could read them by themselves, but you jump in and you're like, but I've totally missed something. Like, I don't know what happened here. And so by having that recap, it truly makes it an accessible entry point to the series. And like I said, the male main character writes it, and it's so funny. Like, I listened to the audiobook of it because I have like an early copy of the audiobook, and it is hilarious. It's so good.
Well, mine, I'm thinking of writing in the tone of the Gossip Girl voice. Hey, Upper East Siders.
Yeah.
So I'm going to experiment with that one a little bit. Okay, I can see we are going to sit here the whole evening, because that is very typical for us.
Yes.
Jourdan, I have to say thank you. This episode has been incredible. Just understanding what you do, what you've been through to get here has been inspiring, for lack of a better word.